Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's. Hello, friends. Welcome back. I have missed you. I have been thinking about you. I so appreciate you. I'm giving space for this re-entry process, as well as your sweet support and interactions with some of my past favorite conversations. Thank you. Thank you for this time. And I am really excited about what is next for us collectively, and what is next for you, what is next for me, and what is next for these beautiful, beautiful women that I find myself in conversation with here. Today's episode is no different. I've met Nicole Cramer in a networking group that I'm in that was started by Nicole Khalil, who we've had on the podcast before as well. That's also where I met Meg Burton-Tedman, who we had on the podcast recently, and just so many other fabulous women that you will be hearing from in future conversations. It's just been such a gift. And Nicole and I had a beautiful conversation, which you will hear, and we started about 20 minutes before I hit record and had this amazing, expansive conversation. And now, as I look at the clock, our call started 3.5 hours ago. So there's been more conversation that was not recorded than what was, but I think we captured some really good pieces for you to hear as well. Nicole Cramer is a sales and conversation coach. She is known for merging human connection with sales strategy, and as an exactly what to say certified guide, she's passionate about enhancing women's business acumen. Transitioning from a successful 7-year corporate career, she now supports entrepreneurs and businesses in honing genuine sales conversations, transforming connection into an art. You are going to love this conversation. It is full of beautiful nuggets, but one of my favorite things that she said is that we can choose our life or our list. And I can't wait for you to hear her expound on that and make that decision for yourself today as you sit back and listen to my latest conversation with Nicole Cramer. Nicole Cramer, I am so looking forward to this conversation and hearing all the wonderful, fabulous things that are in your heart. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I feel very excited to be here and to have this conversation with you, Wendy.
It's been really fun. The recent conversations have been with friends that are newer to me. So I feel like I'm getting to know that person in real time with my listeners, and I'm a trustworthy gal. So I know that they are here for it and are interested in all of these beautiful humans that I'm being drawn to. And so I'm really excited to introduce you to me as well as the people who are listening. So we'll start with the question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, how are you saying yes to yourself in this season?
This season for me is about saying yes to trusting myself,
Hmm.
leaning into my truth and knowing that that is enough. I don't need validation. I don't need permission. I don't need somebody else to approve it. And that's been something that's going on for a couple of years now that I didn't realize that I wasn't trusting myself. I was outsourcing my own thoughts, beliefs, ideas to other people's validation. And that was an interesting realization to have, because what that meant is I'm not trusting myself. And you
Hmm.
don't just go from that realization to then going, oh, well, I trust myself now.
Right.
It's no different than any relationship with any person. Trust doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time.
Hmm.
And so that's been a big, how do I say yes to myself? How do I lean into that? How do I know that what my thoughts are enough without anybody else's stamp of approval?
Wow, that is so big. I'm so happy that's how we're starting, because if we were at the end, this would have to be 2 episodes. So thank you for sharing that. You mentioned you likened it to a relationship with another person. And the thing that came up for me is that typically when we meet someone new, there's an assumed trust um amount. Like there's a deposit, there's already been all the deposits in the trust bank, they start in the positive, and usually it's something that happens where we lose their trust, they are no longer trustworthy. So do you think that this was a process of conditioning and actions that communicated that you didn't trust yourself, or was this a result of something that made you say internally, I'm not sure I'm trustworthy, I'm going to need to get some other opinions here?
I think it's a combo of all of it. I think that there was some conditioning growing up where people who cared about me and loved me felt they knew what was best for me. And in many ways they did, but it was very easy to just start to listen to that and kind of believe that somebody else knew better for me, right? Older people who love and care about me, who are raising me. And I think that's part of it. I think the second piece would be mistakes that I've made where maybe I wasn't gracious and kind to myself and judged myself and was more harsh than I needed to be. And so that severed some trust. And then I think the realization in a conversation that I was having with somebody, and I said an idea that I had that I was really excited about, or I was wondering about something. And my first thought was, let me go talk to my coach about it. Let me go ask my coach.
Mm.
And I love coaches. I am one. I will always, always invest in myself and be a part of my own personal growth and journey with that. And when we begin to use coaching and mentorship as a crutch, and we're looking for an answer, then it's not actually giving us the benefit that we really can receive from that relationship, because really coaching is meant to make us more of ourselves,
Right.
right? And expand and grow in all the ways that our desires are speaking to us. Coaches help bring that out of us. But if we're not being careful, coaching is still a power dynamic, right? There, you're on
Right.
one side or the other of a power dynamic. And that's another realization I had around that time, as a coach who also has coaches. I realized that's kind of where I was existing, only on one side or another. I was either being coached or coaching. And I got myself lost in the shuffle with my own relationship with myself.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I would say those are the things for me in combination that kind of over time, like anything, started to chip away at my trust for myself. Being a small child and knowing that people cared about me and loved me and were telling me things that were good for me. Cool. Mistakes that I've made along the way where I got hurt or I was embarrassed. And it's like, don't trust yourself because look at what that did for you the last time. And then finding coaching containers that were amazing and the coaches were amazing, but I leaned too much into my lack of trust for myself. And the other thing with coaching for me or any relationship is we've got to be careful we're not looking for the answers.
Right. And say more.
And that's exactly where I started to see people sometimes come to me for answers.
Right.
And I go to others for answers. And what I know for sure, and that's part of my season right now of saying yes to myself, what I know for sure is that the answers are in each of us.
100%.
I don't have your answers, Wendy. You don't have mine. I don't care if you are the ultimate coach of all coaches. Nobody else has our answers. And I learned this in a lot of ways, even before I had that realization that I was looking for the answers with coaches. And the reason it was not apparent to me at first is because coaching is a good thing.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing thing. And so I wasn't seeing it as possibly something that was holding me back from my relationship with myself. And I'll give you an example. It was easy. So with my, a therapist that I started working with in 2017, one of the first things that he helped me to start to see is that I was looking for answers outside of myself in things like work,
Sure.
relationships, alcohol. It didn't matter what it was. I was always looking outside of me. So when I started on a personal development journey and doing things like reading books that were all self-development books and hiring coaches and mentors that were all meant to help me grow, I was blinded at first to the fact that that was just another replication of me looking for answers outside of myself.
Sure.
And the reason I was blinded to it is because these are good things.
Right.
Right. I will never forget the first time. So I had a really low point at the end of 2017. It was one of the hardest times ever in my life. And it was a time where, and I don't say this lightly, I know I was very, very clear and in touch with why people kill themselves. I had that feeling and it's the scariest place I've ever been.
I can imagine.
And I just knew for sure that I didn't want to do it. There was something deep down in me that wasn't going to let me do it. Thank goodness.
Right.
But what was interesting is I was also in that moment of being at the lowest point in my life, at the highest point in my life, everybody else around me. I had accomplished a considerable amount of things that I said I was going to accomplish. And I was quote unquote living the dream. And to be simultaneously in a place where people see one version of you and you are living a very different experience was a hard place to be.
Right.
And the shame cycle starts because people are like, oh, you're living the dream. You did it. You're amazing. You did this, you did that, all the accolades, right. That I had created. And I was like, why don't I see it that way? And so that's around the time that I found through divine intervention, how it always happens, my therapist, Kevin. And when I first started seeing him, I was reading books because I was like, okay, I'm going to climb out of this hole. I've hired somebody to really support me in this. And these books are so great for me. I'm getting so much motivation from them. And every week I'd go into his office and I basically would give him another book report, Wendy. It was like every week I'm like, so this week, the book I'm reading is blah, 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 blah. Right. And here's what I learned and here's what it's doing for me. And then the next week. So this week, here's the book I'm reading this week, after like 4 weeks in a row of me giving him book reports, he goes, Nick, stop. And I was like, what? Like right in the middle of one of my book reports. I was like, it was just getting good. What do you mean? He's like, stop with the books. And I was like, but the books they're good for me, right? They're personal development books that like they're good. He said, Nick, this isn't about the books. You're looking for the answer in the books. You're looking for an answer. And you're never going to find it because that's not where the answer is. The answer's in you. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, no, you got it. You've got to look at me and tell me that you know the answer's in you. I said, I know the answer's in me. He said, you're not going to find it in the books. I said, I know the answer's in me. So does that mean I can't read my books anymore?
Right. What would the good girl say to something like that? If you could tell me, I'll say it.
I'll say it, right? And so
I'm trying to be your best therapy client ever to tell you how I'm doing all of this development so you don't even have to do your job.
Yep.
Aren't these sessions great?
Being here. Yeah.
Right. We're going to send you a thank you note for being your number one patient. I'm so excited.
That's it. That's it. I'm going to knock it out of the park. I'm going to be the best here in this too. I do studying outside of our sessions.
Yeah.
And he said, you can read whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. As long as you promise me that you know the answers in you, that you're never going to find it outside of you. So that was the first time that I realized even good things can become when we don't trust ourselves, when we aren't leaning into our relationship with ourselves, we are going to seek outside of ourselves for something that we are never going to find. And that creates this cyclical, and he even said, he's like, it's the whack-a-mole of addictions. Like, take your pick, right? If it's not work, it's alcohol. If it's not alcohol, it's relationships. If it's not relationships, it's books. If it's like, to the degree that we continue to look outside of ourselves and we're never going to find it, it keeps us on this vicious cycle. And that was a big aha. That was a big, oh my gosh. And the understanding that the answer is in me, although intellectually I knew it, that was kind of the beginning of really starting to lean into, all right, well then what is it? How do I find it? And what I've learned is I've never not known. None of us don't know. Is that too many negatives in a row? Not all of us know, but we're very busy denying it, covering it up with rational, realistic, practical, pragmatic reasons why that is not our answer. It just doesn't even make sense. It can't be possible because of this. And so,
too good to be true.
Too good to be true. Why me? There's no way this could happen for me. Who am I? Look at her. She's doing it because of this. Like, we all have our answers. And the sad thing is, we're so busy covering up the answers. And that to me is where we suffer. That's where we start to lose our way. And that's why right now more than ever, and listen, I'm still in that place, like I said, of learning to trust myself and learning to trust that this is the answer, this is the way. And as I said earlier, trust doesn't happen overnight, it happens over time.
Right.
And that's why I think this year has been about my relationship with myself. And there's nobody, in the work that I do as a sales coach, I teach sales language, I teach sales conversations. And quite often I have found myself recently teaching from a space of your number one sale is you. The words that you use matter. And the most important words that you use are the ones that you use with yourself. 100%. And you only take people as far as you've gone yourself, right? Whether you're a coach and you coach clients or you're a parent, like to the degree that you have taken yourself to those places, you've visited your relationship with yourself, you've worked on your relationship with yourself, like you can't help anybody else unless you can help yourself.
Right. Right. And your body and your brain is listening to the words that are coming out of your mouth.
Yep. Or
it's so important, right? In your thoughts, for sure.
Yep.
I have a 9-year-old daughter, and it's so fascinating. You are a coach, you're in this coaching space, the concept of retreats and 1-day intensives and all of these things where we make these quantum leaps and all of these beautiful things. And I've just noticed with 4th grade, probably started in 3rd grade, actually, and this realization, because she spends weekends with her dad and weekdays with me, but school is much longer than that amount of time. And she spends several hours with a rather large group of children that were not raised in my house. So when she comes home, she's almost a different human. So I feel like, oh my gosh, I need to make up for all of this time that she's not in my presence. And I was thinking just the other day, oh my word, she is spending all day at school getting all of this information like I do when I go on a retreat, but some of it is fabulous and for her good, and some of it is absolute nonsense and misinformation, and she's just bombarded every day for several hours. And I'm I I have no words and so much to say at the same time about that, and how I'm wanting to teach her to be kind to herself with her words, because she'll say things like, I'm awful, or I'm not good at that. And I'm like, what? Who's your mother? Like, what are you talking about? You're awful. It's like, please, sweetheart, I want to talk about why you feel that way. But first, can we reframe what you're saying? And then she rolls her eyes, which is not okay, but she rolls her eyes and says, I'm amazing and I can do anything. And because we have this sticky note on her mirror, and I ask her to say it every time she looks in the mirror. And I had to tell her, honey, there are some children whose mommy tells them that they're awful and that they're not good at this, and they don't gasp in shock and horror until their child says, I am amazing and I can do anything. So
Right.
I just think it's so fascinating that even if we are under any assumption that we're the good girl, or we're doing it right, or we're doing it perfectly, or we're taking all the classes and reading all the books, and that everything is just going to work out this way and it's just going to happen. There are so many forces at work that give us the opportunity to check in, to trust ourselves, to listen to our bodies, to reframe what we're thinking or saying, because it is not in alignment. It is not truth. It is not what is in our highest and best. But there is a lot of noise out there that it makes it seem like this is the narrative that we should hold on to.
It is. And what's interesting to me about your story is because at 9 years old, you're also looking to others to understand how to act, how to behave, right? You're looking for examples in the world of how to be. And typically you look to the people that you know, like, and trust but you said there are potentially mothers and fathers, whoever out there, that are telling their children that they're terrible or they're not good enough. And what's interesting to me is, while that is true, there are directly people saying, I mean, I was a high school teacher for 15 years. I saw all kinds of things. Let me tell you, it was heartbreaking in many ways, right? But what we are all doing at any given time for everybody in this world is we are all walking permission slips. So while there may be mothers saying you're terrible, there are also mothers saying to themselves that they're terrible, and others see that. And I think that that's why our relationship with ourselves is not about us only. Yes,
Right.
it's about us, but it's also about what are you condoning in a bigger way for the people in your life? What is your yes to yourself? What is your vocabulary to yourself, your thoughts, your beliefs about yourself? What message is that giving to the other people in your life that you might not even realize, but they're watching? They're watching and they're taking notes. And, you know, that's why 0 to 7 is like one of the biggest times for development for children, because they don't communicate as well, but they're watching all the people around them.
Right.
And to me, that's even more of a testament for why our relationship with ourselves is so important, because, you know, let's just take mothers, for example. A lot of times you talk to mothers, and we know we're women. We know that this happens. They aren't doing what they really want to do in life.
Right.
They aren't really going after their dreams. And yet they're living this life hoping that my kids can do anything that they want. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. Well, how are you showing them that?
Right.
By denying yourself your desires, you're actually giving them the opportunity to not go after theirs. You're showing them what it actually looks like. You're saying one thing, you're doing another. And that's why I think our words to ourselves are just beyond important, beyond just us, because there are others in your life that it impacts and affects just by how you show up in life alone.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. I'm reading a book by Florence Scovel Shinn, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she wrote this book, The Game of Life and How to Play It.
Oh,
And
I read it. Yes.
Yes. So, and it was written in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And it looks like all the other books I'm reading that were just published this year. So it's really fascinating. And one of the books, it's a collection of books, and one of them is called Your Word is Your Wand. And it just is communicating and reminding me of the power of our words, and even saying things like, oh, I hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Well, you get what you prepare for. Yeah. So just changing this narrative internally and externally of only speaking what I want to happen. Yep. And even being careful about not being so legalistic, like, oh, darn it, I said the wrong thing, or what, wait. Yeah. It's making me pause though and say, if someone asks me a question and I'm ready to answer in the way that I've always answered, but I hear the words falling out of my mouth and, oh, hold please. I'm going to say that again. Just give me a minute. And thankfully, people are very gracious. Like, I'm not having a stroke. But I am wanting to be very intentional about my words, because I am in this season realizing how very important they are, and how they're very important, not only for me and my trajectory, but also for Amelia as she is watching me, as well as for the beautiful humans that listen to this podcast. They are so graciously putting me inside their ears for an hour a week. That's a responsibility. I'm not just going to chat about nothing, or also not be intentional of the beautiful gift that this is. Yeah. And as a result, I am so aware of the difference in my life, the difference in my experience, the difference in the interactions that I have compared to the interactions that I used to have. There are relationships and experiences that I used to have very commonly, and would even anticipate with dread the next time it was going to happen. And even in talking about it, and I've spoken about it on the podcast before, talking about those things, even if it happened in the past, how my body doesn't know that it's not happening right now. So as I would speak about this person, it's my neighbor, yeah, I would just start to feel this tenseness in my body, and I would have to stop and say, okay, just going to remind myself that this is not happening right now. And in one of Florence's books, she wrote, as soon as you are undisturbed by the cruelty, they will cease to be cruel. And that, I'm an underliner, and I was underlining and circling and making all of these designs on that sentence. And it has transformed my experience, and nothing has changed and everything has changed.
Yep.
It's so powerful.
It's the slight tweaks. It's the little things that make the biggest difference. And in everything in life, it's, you know, my mentor has a saying, do the basics to a high standard consistently. And to me, and you said it really well, being intentional with our words makes all the difference. And because our words are an extension of our thoughts are an extension of our beliefs are what are shaping and molding our entire reality because of that, right? What we believe is what we think is what we say, and we're creating it. And so I like to say our words matter, literally, because they turn into matter.
That's right.
Literally, because the thought turns into things. And when you change your words, you really do change your world.
That's what she said. It's true.
Yep. It changes everything. And not just for you, but again, for the people around you. Because, you know, one of the things I'm saying yes to in the season of trusting myself is that my voice matters. My stories matter. And I've had a really hard time owning that, because although I have undeniably achieved things in life, so have a lot of other people, right? And who am I? And what does my story matter? And, you know, I didn't save anybody from a burning fire. I haven't won 7 gold medal at the Olympics. I didn't lose a leg and then run a marathon. Like, why does my story matter? And as I was literally saying exactly that to somebody, because this was a person that I had met and been connected with, and he looked at me and he said, why are you not telling your story on stages? This is incredible. And that was my response. I said, well, because of, you know, and this goes back to what we said earlier, Wendy, people are denying their desires. That was me in that moment, denying my desires, saying, well, because of this and this and this and this. And I gave him all the reasons. I was like, well, because I didn't do this and I didn't do that and I didn't do this. And who am I if I haven't saved anybody from a burning fire? He said, you're somebody that every single person in that audience can relate to, because you didn't do something so grand. You did something even more relatable. And since then, that conversation with him, you know, because that kind of made me start to realize, like, oh, it's because I didn't do those things.
That's right.
That my story is even more meaningful. And what I know now is, first of all, what's personal is universal.
Right.
If I've experienced it, I'm a human, and the common denominator is we are all humans and we all experience the same similar kinds of things, right? And I didn't want to tell my story because I was making it about me. In my mind, it's like, what does my story matter? What do I matter? Well, I don't. But when I tell it, when I share it, when I have the courage to show up like that, other people see themselves in my story. I'm not telling my story to say, look at me. I'm telling my story to say, come with me.
That's right.
I'm telling my story because somebody else will have hope and see possibility and realize they're not stuck, because there's something so relatable about me or something so similar about my experience that they connect with, that they then see possibility in their own lives. And when I had that realization, I was like, holy guacamole, it's not about me at all.
So glad.
It's not about me. And I am holding back from changing somebody's life, not because I'm changing it, but because my yes gives them permission for their yes. And if I tell them a story of possibility, they see it for themselves and they go change their lives because of it.
That's right.
And, I heard this quote the other day and I just loved it. And it made me cry as soon as I heard it. Your life may be the only Bible that someone ever gets to read.
That's
And to
beautiful.
me, that's not like a religious statement at all. I don't care if you're Christian or not, have read the Bible or not. The bottom line is the Bible's a book that's been around for thousands of years. And yet we keep reading from the same book, but yet everybody's story that tells the story of what they learned is different. And that's really what this is. It's if I share my story, then that is the opportunity for somebody else that maybe they wouldn't have had otherwise because they can see themselves in me.
That's so beautiful. Now, how is that realization interacting with your work? So, because when I feel like with each new iteration and each new discovery for us personally, the work that we're doing, because we're entrepreneurs and we're creating something out of nothing, as we evolve, our creation needs to change. Or if it doesn't, I think it can cause us to doubt one of those two things because they're no longer in alignment. Or are you finding that it's more in alignment? I don't know. What is your experience?
I have found, you mean as I step further into this season of trust, is it feeling more aligned to tell my story?
Well, right. And how is that working with your work? So will you be on stages telling a different part of your story? Are you on stages now? Because I know you do your sales coaching and you're certified in exactly what to say, which is a program which has made me think, oh gosh, Nicole is not going to enjoy this conversation because I'm one take Wendy. I've got no scripts. I've got nothing. So this is clearly not on the exactly what to say script. But I was just wondering, how is this interacting, this trusting of yourself and surrendering to the movement of that? How does that interact with the frameworks that have built what you've been working on? And do they interact, or is there a shift or a new definition?
Such a good question. And I feel like there's so many different things I could say here. First of all, I am an exactly what to say certified guide, and yet I consider myself to be a very unscripted, off the cuff person. I'm all about the format, like what we're doing here, because I feel like that raw connection that we have in that moment to what's coming out is what people really relate to and connect with. So it's funny because a couple of years ago, the mastermind that I was in, all the women were like, oh my gosh, unscripted is like your thing. Like you should be unscripted. Like that should be your, and I never like rebranded myself or anything with it. But one of the things I'll say about being unscripted, and the reason that you can be unscripted, is because you've done the work before the work.
Yes.
Right? Like let's say I'm an actress and how do I deliver my lines? Well, I certainly didn't just know them because somebody said, hey, we want to hire you to be in this production as an actress. It wasn't like when they said, hey, come do this, that the lines just went in my head. There was a table read and a script that I was given, and we had to practice it, and we had to, and it eventually got to the point where I had so many reps and so much practice that I delivered it on a stage. And guess what happened? People cried and people laughed and had reactions to it. And I say that because as a sales coach, that's quite often how I explain what we can expect in a sales conversation. Because although I wouldn't suggest somebody show up with a line by line script, I would absolutely suggest that you have your rhyme and reason and your method for how you want to handle calls, and you practice that. You find what works for you. I call it a flow. Instead of a sales script, I call it a sales flow. And you practice that and you use that, but not for the first time in the first conversation that you're having with somebody. Get the practice, go through the reps so that when the time comes to deliver it, you do feel comfortable. And the reason I use the acting examples, a lot of times people are like, oh, scripts, they're just robotic and they're not natural and yada, yada, yada. Well, if you've ever cried or laughed at a movie, you're crying and laughing and having an emotional reaction to something that somebody learned from a script, right? No different than if you are a dancer and you want to learn a new dance. You're going to go through the choreography. You're going to learn it. You're going to practice it. And then you get to the point where you deliver it and you're not counting. You're not thinking of the steps. Your body just knows it and your body just does it because you get to that point, right? I'm sure we've all done the electric slide at some point in our life at a wedding that we've gone to, right? The first time you did it, you were like, okay, step back, forward. Okay. Da, da, da. And then maybe it took a drink or two. I don't know. But then once you learned it, you're like twisting and turning and adding your own flair to it, but it's the same dance.
Right.
But you made it yours and you had fun with it and your body flowed with it and you didn't have to think about all the steps. So in what I teach, it's sales conversations. And it doesn't just mean, hey, pick up the phone. Hey, I'm going to try to sell something to this person, right? It's any stage of the initial connection that you have with somebody, staying in the game with somebody, building the relationship, because I teach sales from a relational perspective. But to me, everybody's in the business of selling something.
Right.
Right? You even having the conversation with your daughter around how to communicate better with herself. That's a sale. And I highly doubt that maybe the first time she said something, you were caught a little off guard. And in that moment, you were thinking of something to say. But I guarantee since then, you've been very intentional about how to show up to support your daughter through this. As a matter of fact, you and I just had a conversation on this podcast about how you've thought through how to support her better. And she's got a Post-it note on her mirror. And when you catch her in that moment, you help her reframe. And then you talk about why she feels that way. Like these are intentionalities that you've created around that conversation so that you can stay in that game with her, so that you can help her throughout and sell her on the idea that she is the little amazing 9-year-old badass that she is. And she doesn't have to listen to all these kids that are in her class and what they might be saying and doing. She can trust herself. And you selling her on that is going to change the direction of her life forever. That's a sale.
That's right.
And you're not just willy-nilly showing up and being like, Amelia, right? Is it Amelia?
Yes. Yep.
You're not being like, Amelia, da, 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 da. You're thinking about this, right? And when things matter to us, the critical conversations in our life, some of them are sales conversations, some of them are conversations with a partner, some of them are conversations with a child's teacher, some of them are conversations with our children. Like your critical conversations across the board deserve your time, focus, and attention so that you're not just showing up willy-nilly. And so how it's impacted my work is as a sales coach, that's really what I teach people first and foremost is, well, what are your critical conversations right now? And most of the time in my work, it's around business. But what I've also noticed is when they start to improve their conversations in one area, it improves every area.
Sure.
And I had a client like 2 years ago come to me. The first time I ever taught a workshop around just sales language, right? I've been a sales coach for years, but I thought, let me do a workshop just on sales language, just on exactly what to say. And one of my clients who'd been a client of mine for a while reached out to me and she's like, oh my gosh, I have a huge win I want to share with you. I just made a $5,000 sale because I used, like, I practiced what you told me to practice and I went and used it and it worked. And I was like, that's amazing, Carrie. I'm so excited for you. She said, but I have an even bigger celebration. Nicole, you've saved my marriage. You saved my marriage. I've been using these same things that you taught us in the workshop, and I've been using it in conversations with my husband. And we had a conversation last night that we've never had. And we opened up and I used this language. You saved my marriage. And I was like, wow, can you put that in a video? And can I use it? Like that's, but it is so impactful when we recognize, because to me as a sales coach, yes, I'm teaching sales and it's under the umbrella of business, but we're selling everything in every area of our lives. And when you learn how to be a better communicator, when you learn that your words matter, when you learn that we aren't doing this to people, we're doing this for people. We're learning how to connect better and have better conversations for people because it helps all of us. And so, and like I said earlier, the number one sale is ourselves. And so how dare I try to do any of this anywhere else outside of me until I really am focused every day and being intentional every day on how am I talking to myself? How am I communicating with myself? And that starts everything. That starts everything. It sets the tone of everything, because if you're not convinced, you can't convince.
100%.
The thing that you're always selling, my very first, so I told you I was a teacher for 15 years. And my very first sales job, I walk in on day one and the district manager calls me in. He's like, I know you're nervous because, you don't have sales experience because you've been a teacher, but I want you to know one really important thing. And if you always remember this, you will always be successful in sales. People will buy from you because they like you. You may not have the cheapest prices. You may not have the best equipment. You may not have the best offer. You may not. None of that is going to be the reason why people say yes to you. They're going to say yes to you because they like you. And that was true in my job in that specific instance, but it's true for all of us everywhere. We're really only ever just selling ourselves. And that's why our lack of trust for ourselves actually is what severs the relationships we're looking to create, whether it's for business or personal or whatever the reason is. Because if you're not convinced, you can't convince. Why is anybody else going to trust you if you don't trust yourself? You can only help people as much as you've helped yourself. And if you want somebody else to trust you, you sure as heck better be working on trusting yourself. And that to me is, there's no sale that's ever going to be more important in your entire life than the sale of you on you. And when we start to see that sales aren't transactional, that they are relational, then you'll start to see all the different opportunities you have to show up differently for yourself and for others within that context of knowing this is about a relationship. This is about connection. That's what all of this is at all times.
Beautifully said. Of course, that's your job. You can work there another day. So good.
I get to keep it.
You do. So how would you suggest somebody is thinking to themselves, okay, I have outsourced my validation. I have outsourced the answers. How can we collectively move toward trusting ourselves in a way that is trustworthy and sustainable? Can you share any of the steps that you took on that journey and what you think would be, as you said, what's most personal is most universal? So something that we could apply.
Yeah, I am, just so we're all clear, I am in the journey and I am taking steps as we speak to understand how to do this.
Sure.
And as I say that, and as I'm doing this, I'm also very clear the answers are in me. Like the irony of that, right? It's like, I'm in the journey to figure it out. Well, it's all in here. And here are some things that I've learned. First of all, it really does start with self-talk. It really does start with so we've got to be aware of our thoughts, and I think Michael Singer said it best when I read The Untethered Soul. He talks about the roommate. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
I haven't, but you're the fourth person in a week to reference it. So I'm pretty sure I'll be ordering that today.
Yep. Trust that. He wrote two amazing books. One is The Untethered Soul. The other is The Surrender Experiment. Both are incredible. And when I read The Untethered Soul, he talks about the roommate, and more or less like there's your ego self and your soul self, right? Like I believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so there's your soul, your spirit, and then there's your ego, which for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, is your manager of your human self, right? Your ego kind of takes care of things. Your ego is a good thing. I think it gets misunderstood in a lot of ways. At least I know I've misunderstood it in many ways, but my ego is the reason that like, I don't touch a hot stove, because I've learned that I know that that's really a dumb idea, right? I don't walk out in front of oncoming traffic because that would so it's here to keep us protected, but it protects us too much. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier about it comes up with all these rational, reasonable, logical things, right? And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a high school teacher, I knew and we've talked a little bit about this, denying our desires. I knew I wanted to be in a sales job, and I knew I wanted to be number one in the nation. I'd never sold anything. I was a high school teacher, but I had friends that were in sales, and it sounded really cool, Wendy. It sounded really cool to be able to be like, I'm number one in this quarter, or I just signed the biggest contract of my life. Like, the competitor in me was like, that sounds so cool. And I played volleyball one day with a friend who I'd never played volleyball with before. We needed a sub. I called him. He came and played with us. And I like to win. I'm very competitive. We walked off the beach that day, and he looked at me and he said, I have never seen anything like what I just saw. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, you love to win. I said, and I hate to lose.
Mm.
And he goes, have you ever thought about sales? Like, would you ever like consider a sales job? He didn't know that for the past year or two, I've been thinking about it nonstop. And I looked at him, I said, yeah, I'd love to be in sales. I'm sure I'd be great at it, but
right. Here's all the reasons.
It's not that I've been a teacher for 15 years. It's too late to switch careers. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any experience. It's a huge pay cut. What if I'm not good at it? And I believe that people either have the list, the life they want, or they have the list of reasons why not.
Mm.
You're either living the life you want, or you have the list of your reasons. And in that moment, I was so clear. I had my list. You've got your life or your list. And I had my list. And
That's
it was
so good.
Right. And here's the thing, Wendy, from that moment until 2.5 years later, 2.5 years after that moment, when I stood there, I remember exactly where I was on the beach that day. And I looked at him and I said, I can't do it because this. 2.5 years later, I was the number one salesperson in the country at my sales job. Number one out of hundreds of people. And so I say all of this, again, I tell my story not to be like, look at me, I was number one. I mean, was it pretty, am I allowed to cuss?
You may. It's not, if your mother is listening, that's between you and
my
your
mother will hate it. She will hate it.
I will not be cussing because my mother is listening, but go ahead.
Oh, well, out of respect for your mom, I won't. But it was a huge deal. But like in that moment, I was so ready to justify all the reasons that my ego was like, it's unsafe, it's unsafe, it's unsafe, it's unsafe, it's unsafe. That's really what that was. Because looking back, and we can always connect the dots looking back, it clearly was 100% possible.
Right.
Because somehow, some way, I got out of my own way and I went and did it. And I think that's one of the hardest parts is the discernment that we need to have to inspect those thoughts. Is this bullshit or is this true?
Right.
Is this actually a legit reason why, like, I'm not going to walk out into oncoming traffic? That's a legit fear. That's something that I should listen to.
Right.
But I've been a teacher for 15 years. I couldn't possibly go do something else. Is that true?
No.
In the truest of truths, is that true? No. And that's hard because it's not just in our minds that it's believable. It's supported in conversations that we have with people that we respect, love, and admire. It's reinforced in so many ways. And then again, that's where we start to outsource and we don't trust ourselves. Well, the truest piece for me is that that's what I wanted.
Right.
But I was having trouble listening to it. So I think that was a long way of saying one of the things that I think is really important is having that awareness and that ability to look at our own thoughts.
Right.
And have the discernment to know, is this really a threat or is this not? And if it's not, how do I have the courage to step into it and know that I'm going to be supported? I'm going to be okay. Right.
Right.
Because I keep talking a lot about self-trust, but like in my belief system, there's something bigger here. And it's the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it. It's trust in that too. And me trusting myself only comes on the heels of me trusting that voice, that whatever it is, that signs, signals, messages that I'm receiving. How do I trust that? Right.
We talk a lot on the royal we talks a lot on this podcast about that. If these dreams are in you, these dreams are for you. So God knows. He isn't mean. And I mean, as you know, I believe in God, and the trusting myself is not me apart from God. It's God in me. When I'm trusting me, it's God in me. It's the Holy Spirit. It's the Christ within. It's whatever you want to call it that makes you say yes to yourself. Call it. You can call it whatever you want.
Yep.
The fear of not being able to do it, that's based on all the reason, all of those logistical, logical voices, experiences, those are loud.
Yeah.
And the loudest voice isn't always the truest voice. And we know it's that still small voice. And so, to your point earlier, where you said you were outsourcing a lot of this permission, I think, and I know you believe the same because you are a coach, that in this infancy, learning that means I've got something to say or something to hear. So let me straighten
Yep.
up here.
Yep.
I used to be embarrassed about that, and now I get really excited. Like, ooh, what's
Because you
coming
know
up?
what it means, right?
That's
You're
right.
able to discern. Yep.
That's right. Get your pens, friends. Something's coming. That's good.
Yep.
So that there is a point in the infancy of letting this dream out of your body, because I think that, something happens with secrets that are associated with shame, that we think if we let them out, they will crush us. And with dreams and ambitions and desires that are just so deep and true, we're afraid if we let them out, someone else will crush them. And the opposite happens when we speak the thing that shall not be spoken of. It loses all of its power. And when we share our dreams, they grow. When we give them water and sunshine, they flourish. And that's a part of my desire in this podcast, with my farm stays, with trips to France, to hold space for people and their dreams. And so in this really tender time, I believe that a coach is vital, because having somebody, a coach, a friend, someone you trust, whatever, but another person who wants your highest and best, because as our mutual friend Nicole Khalil says, it's like reading the label from inside the bottle. You need someone on the outside that can encourage you with the certainty that is in your heart as well. And they are unaffected and undisturbed by your ego, because they're not hearing that
Yes.
argument. So I think that it's just such a beautiful time to gift yourself and invest in yourself as you are uttering these words that seem really, really scary and tender, to create a very, very safe environment. And you get to decide how long you stay in that environment. Like you had a realization that you were listening to outside voices more than you were listening to yourself. I am currently in a season where I am only available for conversations like this. I am all rainbows, unicorns, glitter. That's it. That's all I'm available for, because I am in this dream building, dream activating portion of my life. And that's the water and sunshine that I personally need to help this grow.
Love that. Your focus is your faith. Yeah. What you focus on is what you get more of. So focusing on those conversations brings more of them to you. And, I think you said it earlier, like what we speak is what we are creating. And, I read this book and it gave me a really great separation between, or connection to, what commitment is and what goals are. And it's making me think of this right now because of what we're talking about with our words and how we're being, and our words shape our reality. And the word commitment and what it means is commitment is something you demonstrate. Goals are somewhere to go. And who you're being is always going to be more important than what you're doing, because what you're doing is only impacted by who you're being. And the words that we're using, our relationship with ourselves has everything to do with who we're being. Our commitment to ourselves, how do we demonstrate that? Because if you say, like, okay, so this goes back to the question you asked earlier, like, how am I cultivating that self-trust? Well, one of my challenges right now is, how do I get myself back into taking care of me physically? Like, I got out of a workout routine and I wasn't committing, right, to what I said was important to me. So I'm out of alignment. My words say one thing, my actions say another. And so I'm really working on, if I say I'm going to get up in the morning and work out, I've got to keep my word for me.
Right.
It doesn't matter that nobody else is here to see if I did it or not, that I don't have somebody to send a video to and be like, I did my workout. Actually, it's even better that I don't, because this helps me develop my relationship with myself further by honoring that commitment. It's not about the goal of working out. It's, who am I being in this moment? How do I demonstrate? And what I really like that this coach who talked about commitment and goals said is, he gives an example. He said, let me give you an example of commitment. Let me ask you, Wendy, will Amelia ever starve?
No, of course not. No.
You just demonstrated commitment. You didn't stop and say, well, Nicole, who's the president? What's the economy like? Is there a zombie apocalypse?
Right.
What's going to happen in 3 months with the market? Like, you didn't ask me anything.
No.
You literally were like, that's commitment.
Right.
It's something we demonstrate. And so that's been a big piece of my self-trust journey, is, how do I show up and be? Because you know the saying, be, do, have versus have, do, be. We all think and have thought at one point or another that it's, once I have the thing, then I'll do, and then I'll be that person, right? Once I lose the weight, then I'll wear the sexy clothes, and then the man will fall in love with me. Once I have the job, then I'll have the accolades, and then I'll get hired for this consulting job, whatever. And that goes back to what we've been talking about. That's the answer outside of us.
Right.
Once I have this thing outside of me, then it'll complete me inside of me. Once I have this thing over here, but it's be, and then do, and then have. And for me, that's why commitment has been such a part of my journey lately, is, if I be that person right now, then I will start to have the type of experiences and the type of life that that person has. Right. Be, then, or I'll start to do, and then I'll start to have. And so who am I being? Because let's say that emotional eating is a thing for me, and it is. I'll just be fully transparent. It is. If I am in front of the refrigerator and I'm searching for something to eat, it's because there's some big emotion that I don't want to feel, and I don't know how to feel it, and I don't know how to sit with it. And that's my cue. Like, oh, look, what am I avoiding? What am I not trying to feel? And what I'm working on with that is, what would the version of me decide right now? Because as soon as I start making decisions from her brain, that's how I become her. It's not, here I am and here she is, and when I'm her, then I'll do it. How do I be her right now? How do I trust myself right now? How do I put down the celery and peanut butter right now? How do I make the decision right now that she would make? Because if I want to become her, we become by being.
That's right.
We become by being. So how can I be more of her from a place of compassion and love for myself, not judgment, not restriction, not, you idiot, you didn't do it, you didn't make the right decision. I ate celery and peanut butter last night, Wendy. Like, let's just say it to all your listeners right now. I did it, but I'm not mad at I'm not like, oh, did it again. It's okay. Look,
I ate potato chips and a gin and tonic.
let's just all let it out. I love it. But it's like, okay, look, Nick, you've used that for a long time to feel better about things.
Mhm.
And that's okay, because you weren't sure how to handle certain things and how to feel certain emotions and how to process that. And you've done that for a long time. And so it's just a natural thing for you to go back there. And the awareness that I want to do it differently is so cool, because now I always have the power of choice.
Right.
I always have the power of choice. And if I didn't choose right, I can just choose again.
That's right. Freedom is a decision away.
Always. So for me, it's like that level of being has made the biggest difference in my relationship with myself, my relationship with others. And our words matter because that comes from who we're choosing to be and what our thoughts are, what our beliefs are. So yeah, I think that for me is like a big one, is how can I make the decision right now from that person that I am looking to become? Because the sooner I make that decision, the sooner I am her.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I have loved this conversation. Thank you so much. Please tell everybody where they can find you and follow you and be in your ever-changing universe.
Well, right now, Instagram is the best place and the only place to find. Well, there's a couple of places.
You can say
Instagram.
more about that too, if you wish.
Yeah. I got shut down from some of my other accounts. There's some hacking stuff going on. So I am on Instagram at the Nicole Cramer. I have a YouTube channel for anybody who's looking to improve their sales conversations. Definitely check it out. Also, the Nicole Cramer, and LinkedIn. And I would love for anybody who wants to connect, just send me a DM on Instagram. And if there's any way I can support you or help you, would love to hear from you.
So good. Thank you so much, Nicole. This has been a delight.
Thank you, Wendy.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.